The core faith of all Jesus followers is centered around the claimed death, burial, and subsequent physical resurrection of Jesus. This has been the case for nearly 2,000 years now. We will look at why this is important in a future video. But do we have even any evidence for this claimed resurrection? We do have many pieces of evidence from biblical eyewitness statements, archaeological digs, and non-Christian historical records. Again, this is for a future video. But here are my top 5 pieces of evidence. The sight of the burial tomb of such a publicly well-known person of Jesus would have been widely known amongst local Romans, Jewish leaders, and early Jesus followers of the time. Early followers of Jesus were sharing the news that Jesus had physically risen from the dead, and that many had seen him alive again. If the body was still in the tomb, this was easily accessible to verify. Nobody would have reasonably believed such a foolish claim if the body of Jesus was still in the tomb. The tomb was, and still is, empty. As well as Jewish women holding a low social status in the eyes of the people, the eyewitness testimony statements of first century women of the time was not valued or legally permitted. Yet, the first recorded witnesses' statements of Jesus' alleged resurrection and the empty tomb was by some of his female followers. The principle of embarrassment is an historical analysis tool used to determine if ancient writings are authentic. This principle states that if an author includes embarrassing details about themselves, the information is likely to be true. It would have been potentially embarrassing at the time for the authors of the Gospels to include only female first witnesses of such an important key part of the empty tomb message. If the authors of the early Gospels would have wanted to fabricate an early legend or myth story, then it would have been better served by using key male characters, such as maybe Peter, or even perhaps one of the male Jesus followers. Unless, of course, it really did happen, as recorded in the Gospels, and they were just recalling and relaying the truth of real events, that the first witnesses of the empty tomb and physical risen Jesus were indeed women. So how did the powerful and influential Jewish leaders of the time of the alleged resurrection of Jesus respond? Here is an excerpt from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 28. While they were going, behold, some of the guard went into the city and told the chief priests all that had taken place. And when they had assembled with the elders and taken counsel, they gave a sufficient sum of money to the soldiers and said, "Tell people, his disciples came by night and stole him away while he was asleep. And if this comes to the governor's ears, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble." So they took the money and did as they were directed. And this story has been spread amongst the Jews to this day. We will look at the authenticity and reliability of the 4 Gospels in a future video. However, according to the Gospel of Matthew, written some 50 years after Jesus, there was a widespread story that the body of Jesus had been stolen by his followers, implying that the tomb was empty. Even if we disregard Matthew's Gospel as a source evidence for Jesus' resurrection, the author goes to great lengths to address a widespread Jewish leader's allegation that the followers of Jesus had stole his body from the tomb. The tomb of Jesus was empty. First readers of Matthew's Gospel in around 85 AD would have been able to quickly validate this claim. In other words, the tomb was still empty, and the Jewish leaders were asserting that this was because Jesus' followers had stolen the body, Additionally, as William Craig asserts, the reference to the tomb guards falling asleep could only have been a Jewish fabrication, serving no Christian polemic purpose. This is strong evidence that the tomb was empty. The Jewish leaders at the time knew the tomb was empty. Or why would they assert a story that the disciples had stolen the body? But what about the body being stolen by his disciples? If this had happened, as the Jewish leaders were claiming, the early first-hand witnesses of Jesus would have had to have confronted a Roman guard at the edge of the tomb, kept this a secret between themselves, and at the same time sharing a knownly false message about Jesus being resurrected from the dead, whilst enduring and accepting immense persecutions because of this, with a few of them being executed. According to Wright and Craig, Jewish teaching on the resurrection at the time stated that the bodily resurrection occurs at the end of the world. And secondly, all the righteous people would be held together, not as individuals. Moreover, Jewish belief would have had Jesus translated to heaven, not resurrected from the dead, much like Enoch or Elijah from the Old Testament. So the physical resurrection of Jesus could not have grown out of Jewish belief of the time. Straight after the claimed resurrection of Jesus from the dead, his early followers would have orally kept some of his teachings and short basic aspects of the faith. These are known as early oral creeds. According to Dr. Gary Habermas, remarkably, by the time Paul writes his first letter to the Thessalonians in around AD 50, there are at least 30 of these creeds being used, and 24 to 36 of them are in our New Testament. These predate even the Gospel of Mark. Most scholars, including many atheist scholars, agree that the earliest creed is 1 Corinthians 3 to 4, a letter of Paul, and dates back just to several months, or at most 5 years, after Jesus' death, so it's very early. Most scholars date these pre-Pauline creeds between Jesus' death in around AD 30 or 33 and AD 38. Again, very early. Habermas claims that 80% of these early creeds contain references to Jesus' deity, death, and resurrection. This is important, as this means that the message of the physical resurrection of Jesus wasn't added or made up much later, but was there within 5 years of Jesus' death, and most likely months after his death. Here is what the earliest creed says. In Paul's letter to the 1 Corinthians 15, "For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the Scriptures, that he was buried, and that he was raised on the third day in accordance with the Scriptures." Do let me know what you think of below, and if you enjoy this video and want more content like this, do consider subscribing to the channel and like this video. Thank you.